Hello and welcome everyone to Family Law Fridays presented by Florida Women's Law Group. My name is Jadlyn Fleischer. I'm a legal intern here at Florida Women's Law Group. Family Law Fridays is designed to be a resource for all women with any type of family law issue. Today, we will be discussing tips on how to co-parent during the loosening of movement restrictions. Now, before we get started, I would like to give you some information about our host. Our host is Heather Quick, founder and CEO of Florida Women's Law Group, which is a family law firm that advocates for women in North Florida. The firm educates and empowers women on their rights in the law so that they can find the strength to endure the process and end up better financially and emotionally. Heather Quick has been a licensed Florida attorney for the past 20 years, with the majority of her practice being in family law. Please join me in welcoming Heather Quick to Family Law Fridays.
Thank you so much, JD, for the introduction. And I just pulling something up really quickly, but here as we talk today, one, thank you for joining us today on Family Law Fridays and looking at as we are, I don't know the right term, but we are increasing our exposure. We're the phase 2, as the day of the recording of this, we are in phase 2, but many cities are not yet in phase 2 of, reentry, I guess, for lack of a better word. And as we talked earlier during the stay-at-home orders and when everything was really first beginning with COVID, there are challenges if you are co-parenting with your ex-husband and how to manage that. All right, so that was when we had stay-at-home orders and dealing with the virtual schooling, online learning, stay-at-home orders, how we were working, balancing all of that. And I'm hopeful that everyone has managed to get through that. And now we have another hurdle, let's say, to go through as we now can go to restaurants. And certain things are open, certain gyms. And I think in a lot of households, there's probably going to be a differing opinion as to where we should go, what we should be doing. And especially when we're talking about divorced families. As we know, or in my experience, sometimes there's trouble. Sometimes there's not as great communication. It's a great thing when divorced parents can communicate well and, have the ability to compromise and get on the same page. That doesn't always happen. And usually when it doesn't happen, that's when I see them. So a lot of my experience comes from that. And part of this is just to talk through potentially ways that you can communicate better and come to better terms with your ex on how you address the reentry, the exposure, going out into different areas with your children, without your children. Are you exposed, and things of that nature. So let's kind of get to it. One of the things I think is really relevant now is I know I, as a parent, am receiving surveys pretty regularly from the school district so they can take our input. And I think they are very interested in the input based on the parents for as we, plan, hopefully, to go back to school. That's my personal hope as a mother of 3. So what I wanted to share a little bit was, okay, so that's an issue, and that's going to be an issue for several parents because you're going to feel differently. Do we send them back or not? Could have to do with the child's, health status. Do they have risk factors, or somebody in your house that has risk factors? And so, how do we deal with all that? Let's talk about first, okay, so what I have received are some of the proposed health protocols that we've looked at with the schools. And, if you haven't thought about this yet, I encourage you to, because it's going to be here before we know it. It's going to be here in less than 2 months. And these decisions, you need to be thinking about them and thinking about your position and beginning to communicate. But they're looking at screening the staff and temperature, which they are doing now at different camps, things like that. Certainly health screening at home for students. They're going to be sanitizing the buses, and they're going to do regular seating within the academics. That they're not requiring the mask. They're saying they're optional because really, from what I've read as the data, it is to protect yourself. And it's not probably going to do a whole lot I don't even know how much it's going to do to protect you. I know that washing your hands is going to be the best protection. And that's what they talk about, frequent hygiene. And they're trying to limit, where the children are going to sit, at least during lunchtime when there's more of them, and, routine cleaning. So it's pretty basic, but definitely more than what they would have done prior to the outbreak and pandemic. So let's now talk about restaurants. So those are just things I want you guys to think about for school, because you're going to have to determine what your comfort level is, if that's what's going to be done, and does your spouse, your husband, does he agree? Your ex-spouse, does he think, oh, they can go back, they can't? Where do you guys fit into that? Because if you can't figure it out yourselves, you're going to need help getting there, because the children are going to need to go to school. If you two can't agree, it's going to be difficult. But now, like right now, many restaurants are open. Have you discussed that with your spouse? He's picking up the kids. Let's say today's Friday, Family Law Friday, but so he's picking up the kids, going to have them for the weekend. Have you discussed that? If you haven't been out to a restaurant and your children haven't, have you talked to him about that? How do you feel about that? You need to have that discussion, because I do think that even though you may disagree, coming to a compromise, but also knowing where they've been is going to be really important. And I think that's very important to the government officials and who are tracking things and trying to maybe eliminate if there's an area that seems to be maybe providing a lot more contamination or spread. I think that's why a lot of the playgrounds with the kids haven't been open, just because there's really no way to keep those sanitized and all of that, the germs that normally are good for kids. And, we're not going to get into that discussion today, but certainly you need to have that communication with your ex, because you may be comfortable going to a restaurant sitting outside and then say, well, but I don't want you going and sitting inside. Or taking them to the gym. Now, I don't think the childcare areas are open. I don't really know. But what if you're going to the gym and your spouse doesn't want, it's like, well, hey, if you have been going to the gym, now you're putting our kids at risk, and then that puts me at risk and everybody. Where do you stand on that? Have you had that conversation? I said this a lot, and we did an earlier Family Law Friday on communication, I think, or I did an article, but it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's really important, because if we're filing in court, if there are disagreements, if there are things that you think your spouse is doing that are putting the children at risk or not in their best interest, the judges are always going to wonder and they're going to ask you straight up, well, did you call them? Did you try to talk to them? Did you at least find out what their position was so that the two of you could try to resolve it? Or did you just go to your attorney and file? And sometimes that's what you do, because your history, historically it hasn't helped. But I do encourage you to try and reach out. Now, if it can't be by telephone, because maybe the relationship isn't good enough to have a conversation, I would still encourage you to try, and then follow it up with a text or email in a very positive light, and always watch what you write, because it comes back. Same with what you record in a voicemail. But not only are these important for you to discuss with your spouse, but also with your kids. I really don't think they're too young for good conversations about hand washing, good conversations about hygiene. I know that when mine were in preschool, we used to teach them to, do your elbow over and cough, because not like this, because then of course they're not going to go, well, they don't wash them. Mine did. Maybe mine were the only, little germy ones. But back then, there wasn't a pandemic, and it was more unlikely that they weren't going to wash their hands and then touch everything if they sneezed or coughed than at least if they used their elbow, because then that's contained. They're not touching everybody. So, and I'm not saying that's the way to do it now. I'm just saying frequent hand washing is by far the best way to prevent the spread of germs. And so those are good conversations to have, as well as with your ex, and talk about it and tell him, hey, I've talked to the kids about washing their hands. So I know you guys are going, out to eat tonight. Make sure they wash their hands before they go in and then when they leave. And then hand sanitizer when they get in the car, because of course then they've touched the doors and all of that. I think that is a reasonable, prudent way to take care of yourself and try to protect your family. And those are good conversations to have with your spouse, and also where you're going, to what extent, because that is also for one to know, and then maybe you may know something about an area that your spouse hasn't heard. Same with the pools, and I really haven't read anything, so I'm not going to comment as much about going to the pools, except that I think that it's all really pretty good. A lot of chlorine in there, and the children, it's a good way for them to get out the excess energy and things. But at least communicate, because if you don't think it's good, that's what matters. That you communicate with your spouse, and it is one of those things that the courts historically, when you're in a family law case, unfortunately, you have to get input from a stranger on parenting your children if you and your ex can't get along. And the reality is they don't know you or your spouse or your kids, but somebody has to if you two can't get along. So at the very least, express your concerns, your beliefs, and what you would prefer to be done. Because then if they don't listen to you, okay, you've voiced your concerns, they haven't. That's a very difficult way to co-parent. And there are remedies for that. There are things we can do through the court system to assist. They work all the time. They work a lot of the time. And that's the key, to get you through the 18 years of co-parenting your minor children with as little court intervention as necessary, because that just increases the animosity, expense, emotional, and financial to everyone involved. So the communication really is key. Sometimes I recommend a lot, even if you have a good phone call or face-to-face conversation, to follow it up in writing. And I say that from my experience, because I heard what I said, but the other person may have heard it the other way. And I kid you not, I feel like that happens a lot to me. So I'm not as great of a communicator as I think. So I do like to follow up and say, well, this is what I meant, and this is what I said. Just to confirm, is that what you heard? Is that our plan, what we're going to do? So I do advise that you do that. And I do advise that you take into account your other family members that you have access to, and knowing, how much, how much exposure your children have with you versus with your spouse, your ex-spouse, and then other family members, so that you can at least have those conversations, try to protect them as best as possible. In this environment, what we've dealt with in the courts before, children who maybe are, have compromised immune systems, or have, just other health issues where parents disagree on what's the best way. So the courts have experience with that, certainly. And then they rely on the experts. Who are the experts? The pediatricians, the people in the medical field. So I would encourage you as well to talk to your pediatrician. If you have a specific concern for your child and how the best way to manage that, get their advice, ask them what they recommend, and then you can share that with your ex. So then, if they don't agree or are going to disregard your concern, it's not just your concern. You have brought to them that this is what the doctor recommends. This is what we're trying to do. And that will also help you in court. We always do that when, we try to bring in, somebody other than you to get the medical side of it and recommendation. And then the courts can order maybe parenting coordination to help the two of you kind of get through an issue. They do sometimes order mediation. Sometimes there's family therapy that works like, a little bit like parenting coordination, but it's really helping the two of you get better tools to communicate on, what you think is best for the child. And sometimes it's just a matter of learning how to listen to the other person's point of view. And it's not as easy as it sounds. I recognize that. And many times it has not only your ex-spouse, but it has the voice or tone of their new spouse, their new wife, their mother, other things. And they may hear your comments as coming from your mother, your current husband, new boyfriend. So we all have influences that influence our point of view in our communication. And when you've been in a relationship with somebody and if the communication isn't great, I understand that those influences sometimes aren't always the most positive. But while we're going through this situation, we still have access to the courts. We do. And, as it relates to how, much exposure, where the kids are going, those are things that if you and your spouse can't agree, might need court intervention. I know for sure the schooling issue will. And so that's why I started with that. I will end with that, like to be proactive, understand what the school is considering. I know St. Johns County they have what they consider the draft protocols for low, minimal, and high spread. And so it's going to be a combination. I think they're just trying to get input back. I don't know what Duval County is doing or Clay or Nassau, but I imagine it's very similar. I would encourage you to find out, and I would encourage you to begin to have that conversation or to reach out to your ex or your child's father to see if you guys are on the same page. Because if you're not on the same page and it's clear you're not now, we have time before school starts to do something to help you make sure your children get the schooling that you think is appropriate with the right boundaries, protections in place. And it's one of those things, let's say school does start on time on August 10th. On August 1st, we have very little time. And we don't have enough time to get before a judge. And if they are going to be in some kind of schooling, the delay is going to make that more difficult. And not knowing how they're going to start the year, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them. So I encourage you to look at that, think about it now, and try to come to a consensus with your ex so that you're ahead of the game and you're being proactive and we're acting more on the offense rather than the defense. Because then your deadlines, have really already passed and there's only so much we can do, so much court access that we can get because everybody is dealing with these issues. And the courts, are doing their best to handle them as quickly as they can. But even that takes a while. So I thank you for watching today. And I hope that if you are experiencing these issues or know somebody that is or thinks, hey, they need to be thinking about the school year, let them watch this. Talk about it with them. Reach out to us. We'd love to help you if we can. We're here for you. And thank you again for tuning in and reach out to us if we can help you. Thank you.
Heather, thank you for addressing such a relevant topic today, and thank you to everyone who was able to listen in for Family Law Fridays. We hope you found this topic and information helpful. As always, if there is a topic you would like addressed or a question you would like answered, please call, email, or send us a Facebook message, and it could definitely be addressed in an upcoming video. We're available by phone at 904-241-0012. Thank you, and see you next time.